Let's do a quick audio soundbite review of this, because I wasn't here Friday, had no chance to weigh in, and I want to do this, get it over with, move on to the other things, because I'm not going to be distracted by this, but it does deserve a little time and some commentary. Let's go back Friday morning on Good Morning America. George Stephanopoulos talking to Brian Ross about the alleged shooter in Aurora, Colorado.
I want to go to Brian Ross here, because, Brian, you've been looking at investigating the background of Jim Holmes here, and you found something that might be significant.
There's a Jim Holmes of Aurora, Colorado page on the Colorado Tea Party site as well, talking about him joining the Tea Party last year. Now, we don't know if this is the same Jim Holmes, but it's Jim Holmes of Aurora, Colorado.
Okay, we'll keep looking at that.
Why do you go on the air with it if you don't know? You're journalists. Well, one of you is a political... Well, both of you are political hacks disguised as journalists. But at least play the game. At least know before you go on the air. But see, they didn't care whether it was true or not. I maintain to you that they didn't care whether it was true. They know the power they've got. They know the power that they wield. They wanted it out there that the Tea Party might have, it's all they wanted to do, somehow find some way to associate the Tea Party where you have no acts of violence on record. Remember the claim as Nancy Pelosi and the Democrats were marching with the giant gavel to the Capitol in Washington after having passed health care. Maybe they were walking to the vote. And the Tea Party and other Americans opposed to it flanked them on both sides of the street. When it was all over, a bunch of Democrat congressmen say that they heard Tea Party people shouting the N-word. So Andrew Breitbart offered $100,000 to anybody who could prove it. $100,000 to anybody who could prove that it had happened. And nobody could, because it didn't. And the Democrat Party itself put that out there. They project, folks. They are. This is the easiest way to understand them. I've been laughed at for this explanation for years. They are what they accuse us of being. They do what they accuse us of doing. They are the ones who do all of. They are the ones who say all these things that they accuse us of doing and saying. Tea Party has no criminal acts in its history. There's no violent history in the Tea Party. There is at Occupy Wall Street, the Democrat version, but there isn't with the Tea Party. So why put it on the air? Why say it? How did you find this out? What did you do? Google it, Brian? You Google the name and you come up? It later was discovered there are 25 people of this name in this area. 25. How do you automatically associate? And then what? The guy who's misidentified, now he becomes a target. The guy who's incorrectly identified, he becomes a target. He didn't do anything. Minding his own business, he joins the Tea Party, and all of a sudden, a bunch of lunatics are on prowl. And I'm getting ready to go out to the golf course, and I get an email. Guess what, Rush? On Twitter, they're calling for you to be arrested. There was a whole Twitter thread. Well, now I should be arrested. And I said, for what? Well, you're the one that got everybody all worked up on this Bain business. And I had to laugh. I said, okay, history keeps repeating it. They keep trying. They tried to blame me for the Oklahoma City bombing. Try to blame me and Sarah Palin for Gabby Giffords. And now this is pathetic. These people don't even deserve to have jobs anymore. Everybody talks about Brian Ross, but what about Stephanopoulos, who set him up? So you can imagine how this happened. They're sitting in there getting ready to go on the air prior to the show starting, got this event, and they're salivating. And they can't wait. They can't wait to get on the air and make this association of this guy and the Tea Party. Why? Do they actually, in their hearts, believe that's what the Tea Party is? Or do they hope that it's the Tea Party that did this, and they're rolling the dice, and will take the risk in case they're right? Do they hope it? Do they actually think That's what the Tea Party is. I will not rule out that that's what they actually think. I will not rule it out. That I think you talk about political illness as opposed to mental illness. The left is filled with people who are politically ill, and their minds are poisoned, and they are demented, and I will not rule out the fact that they actually think it. They have thought it so long that it's become pathological, where they believe all the things that they believe but can't prove. April 24th, 1995, Minneapolis, President Clinton.
We hear so many loud and angry voices in America today whose sole goal seems to be to try to keep some people as paranoid as possible and the rest of us all torn up and upset with each other. They spread hate. They leave the impression that by their very words that violence is acceptable. You ought to see, I'm sure you are now seeing the reports of some things that are regularly said over the airwaves in America today. It is time we all stood up and spoke against that kind of reckless speech.
And so the Oklahoma City bombing, the aftermath, provided Bill Clinton with a political opportunity to right his sinking ship. That is shortly after the House had been won by the Republicans for the first time in 40 years. And, of course, back in 1995, folks, there wasn't a Fox News. There wasn't anybody else on the radio except me. In 1995. Loud, angry voices on the airwaves. Well, we didn't sit still for it, and we demanded a clarification. What did he mean, or an apology? And eventually Mike McCurry went out and said, no. Because the media was eager for them to speak my name. The media wanted the White House to speak my name. And when push came to shove, they wouldn't do it. And their fallback was, no, we were talking about the Michigan militia and their shortwave radio communications. That's what Mike McCurry said. He was the White House spokesman at the time. The Michigan militia and their shortwave radio communications, which nobody heard. Nobody was monitoring the Michigan militia and their shortwave radio. So when push came to shove and they were asked by the eager media, come on, please say it. Please say Limbaugh's name. They wouldn't do it. Okay, that's 1995. That's 12 years ago. Am I right? Maybe it's longer. 17 years ago. 17 years ago, if I'm doing, I don't do numbers rapidly in my head well. A long time ago. Let's move forward to yesterday. Meet the depressed David Gregory. Weighed in with this while interviewing guests about the mass shooting in Aurora, Colorado.
I was thinking, hearkening back to President Obama's words after Gabby Giffords was shot, and then to Bill Clinton back in 1995 after Oklahoma City, and I'll put something he said up on the screen. He said back then, President Clinton, we hear so many loud and angry voices in America today whose sole goal seems to be to try to keep some people as paranoid as possible and the rest of us all torn out and upset with each other. They spread hate. They leave the impression that by their very words that violence is acceptable. Let me emphasize, as we sit here today, we know nothing about motivation in this particular case, political or otherwise. But President Clinton's words back in 1995 could be true today, couldn't they, about how some of the public discourse can fall on more vulnerable ears.
Desperate, aren't they? Desperate as they can be, still want to tie it to conservatives. Even though Clinton bombed out and would not use my name back in 1995, here's David Gregory resurrecting this and trying to use Clinton words 17 whatever number of years later to do his own imitation of Brian Ross. 2 days after Brian Ross was humiliated and had to apologize, Gregory decides to get in on the action himself. And these people are said to be among the smartest in the world. What about the messages in the movies? David. Well, the message is in the comic books, David. What about being interested in Fast and Furious, David? That's where you're supposed to be looking. It's transparent and it is pathetic. And these are the people who try to politicize everything. Question, do they really believe it or are they just hoping it? It's actually a combination of the two. They would love nothing more. Problem is, at the end of every one of these events or episodes, it looks like the bad guys in question have a closer association with the pop culture of the left than they do anything to be found on conservative media. We'll be back, folks. Don't go away.
In time.